Okay, this could be a continuation of the fake nuclear event that's possible this week video. Or at least it's related, because you shouldn't be afraid. Not just of the fake nuclear event that may or may not be happening this week, but just because there is no death. There's the way it's been presented to us, death as we know it, it simply isn't real. It doesn't exist. There is no death. You don't die. There is no end. It's used as a stressor and a control mechanism here in this, whatever you want to call it, test or game. Originally, I believe when this place was used for the purpose of what it was supposed to be used for, which, a lot of people say it's a training ground of some kind, or I always thought of it more at like what it was like a park or something. Let's go on this way, it's a little more to see. As like a park or a place to like relax or something, like not the music. I don't know, more like a leisure type place. And death or leave is simply just unplugging from this thing. When you're here, there's a small, well, you're not actually here, there's a small aspect of you here. You exist, the whole part of you, the bigger part of you, exists in another place. In my opinion, it's the fifth dimensionally, where the projector, I was talking about that the other day, that's where the projector is. Fourth dimension being the beam that travels, third dimension being the screen that we're on, So, before it was turned into what it is, what they called death was simply just unplugging from this, whatever it is, test or, I hate to use the word simulation because it gives all sorts of wrong ideas, but unplugging from this was just, you just leave it. You're controlling this avatar with a part of your energy, the larger part of which is somewhere else. So when you were done here doing whatever it was you were doing, you'd simply just get out of the organic avatar that you're in, the taxi cab, the body. Now in this new restructured area that we live in, you're told that when you leave the body, that's death, and that's the end, and you die and you cease to exist. And what that does is that creates a lot of anxiety and creates a lot of fear. I mean, it's the ultimate anxiety and the ultimate fear, and they eat that stuff. They eat those emotions. The lower vibrational emotions are like fucking dessert to these people because they can't digest high. When I say digest and eat, that's just the words I'm using to explain the process. They suck up the energy. The archons called it loosh, but they want us to be fearful and afraid and worried and sad. Those are the emotions they want because those are the emotions they can digest. Now, painting leaving the body as a terrible thing, as this death, it makes us afraid of it. And it makes us not only fear it, worry about it, but it causes all sorts of low vibrational emotions trying to avoid it. It creates a lot of stress trying to avoid it, or knowing it's coming or thinking it's coming, because we're told it's the end of everything we are, when it's not at all. It's just, you just get out of here. And in my opinion, when you're out of here, I think it's a lot like when you wake up from a dream. It's like, oh shit, okay. And then you realize who you are, where you are, what you are, and it's not this. It's not this at all. In fact, this is a real constricting place for you. Here you're limited by what your limbs can do, what you can reach. Like my arm goes out, can't reach this thing here. But as what I really am, you don't have to reach for anything. It's just there. Everything happens within, I guess, what would be considered here your mind. There's no communication is done by thought. You are a perfect body of light. It's hard to kind of fathom. Like, I can't really even comprehend what it's like. I don't know what it's like, but I have an idea of what it is. But, you know, obviously I've never been there. Some people say they have with DMT. I've never done DMT, but I've done other hallucinogenic drugs in the past that kind of really put me out. I remember doing in the 90s, I did ketamine, cat tranquilizer. We used to snort lines of it back in my crazy days. And that was real hallucinogenic. I remember doing it, I did a lot of it one day. I had a real interesting experience. I was sitting in a room in my friend's room. Well, he was kind of my boss, in my boss's room, and I was sitting in a chair, all blown out on cat tranquilizer, and I saw the room change. Sorry, just taking a drag of my cigarette. I smoke so that I look cool. No, actually, smoking keeps people away from me out here. When I don't smoke out here, I feel people's breath on my neck because people like getting so close to me. Well, it's not just me. They just like pile on top of each other like mindless bugs. Anyway, that's another subject. But yeah, I saw the room changing, and I saw everything in the room changing. Like the dresser was across from me, and I saw it in all different forms. It became like a bed. It became a fountain. It was the same space was taken up, but it kept changing what it was. And the whole room was doing this. All the different parts of the room were doing this. And I felt like as the whole time this was going on, I heard like whispering around me. And I don't know exactly what they said, what they were saying, but they're people, like human voices, and they were alarmed that I was there. I was in there with them. And they're like, oh yeah, you can see what we're doing. I don't know what they said exactly, but the idea was that I was in a space I wasn't supposed to be in. And I felt a lot like when you watch, you know, one of these TV shows that are filmed before a live audience. Saturday Night Live comes to mind. When they break to commercial, right, and they pull away from the stage, you see all the stage hands and the lights and staging. I suddenly understood that that was the world. And there was all this stuff around it, running basically this 3D show. And since that happened, I never got rid of those guys. The voices, like they pop up from time to time. Now, years later, once I started understanding like demonology and things like that, I kind of married those two together because they are one and the same. That's exactly, I mean, what do you want to call them, demons or whatever, lower dimensional entities, it doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. You know, words are tough because when you try to explain something to someone, like I've talked about demons and angels here before, or as someone pointed out to me recently, angels, a word for them would be angles. They say that's what it's derived from because what they are is they exist, I guess, interdimensionally in these pockets that we can't see, in angles that we can't see. And they say that's what it's derived from. I don't know that much about it, except that I've talked to them. One of them was super cool. The other one wasn't very cool. He was very, I'll have to tell the story someday, but I'm waiting to make that video with my friend from the North Shore who was present for almost all the major demon encounters we had. It took us a while to figure out that's exactly what was going on. We had no idea. Instantly, I mean, at first I thought it was some kind of witchcraft or something. I'm like, there's some kind of... I'll tell the story in time. I know it's probably the only interesting thing I've talked about, and I don't want to go into it right now, but the thing Yeah, death, it's not real. When you die, okay, like I tell this to people, and how do I know this? I don't know. Um, we have all these answers already inside us, not in a hippy-dippy, trippy, woo-woo way, but it's encoded in our DNA. All the information of any question you would have, or the answers are all there. So it's just a matter of tapping into that. And I don't know how I tap into it or how anyone else taps into it, but we have been, and that's what we've been communicating to each other. Like here on YouTube too, like I talk about a lot of guys, we exchange this information, these same exact things are happening to us. And it's been going on, for maybe 3 or 4 years for me, and it increases with intensity. So I've called it the universal library, or the universal consciousness, or God, or whatever you want to call it. You get the answers from it. So sometimes, someone else pointed this out to me, they'll be having a conversation with someone about something that they didn't really know anything about, and they'll find themselves answering questions that they didn't know they had the answers to. They're not lying, it's just sort of coming out. And they'll have that same experience too. And later you're like, how the fuck did I know that? But you know it's true. And and how you know it's true is what Matt over Quantum of Conscience calls your inner tuning fork. You just know something's true. And I believe what that has to do with is once you recognize everything's a frequency and everything's on frequencies, like radio stations, truth has its own radio station. Lies have their own, a lie has its own radio station. And when you simply recognize that concept, even though you don't know the stations really well, you kind of get an idea of what is true and what's false. And you don't know how, because you can't really, having trouble articulating it, but it's like all these stations are out there. All these frequencies are out there. Like I said before, if you had a stereo in your living room and you tune into the disco station, the top 40 station, whatever you listen to, you still have the country station, the rock station, the classical station, the news station. Those are all still in your living room. They're all around you. But you're tuned into that specific one, so you can only hear it. And that's what it is, it's frequencies. And I'm sure, without even knowing this stuff, I'm sure you've had a situation where you're like, I know that guy's mine, or I don't know why, but I just believe her. And you can't explain why. That's like your gut instinct, your innate intuitiveness, which is way smarter than your brain, for lack of a better word. Your brain, like I've used the example before, I'll be standing on the road here and a bus will be barreling toward me. My gut instinct says, get out of the way, this bus is going to hit you. But my brain will argue with me. No, he's going to see me. No, he'll see me. No, he's going to stop. So you should always listen to your gut, your intuition over your brain, because your brain will fuck you around big time. My brain fucks me around every single day, especially your subconscious, which runs most of your day. Your subconscious will poo-poo an idea before you even conceptualize it, being able to do it. It'll already say, no, we know you can't do that because of this other thing. It'll cross-reference some other bullshit. Like, you can't reach that shelf because back in 1972, we tried to reach that ladder. Never mind the fact that you were shorter back then. Your subconscious has recorded that as a no. So it'll keep you from doing anything, just trying anything, because you'll think right away, I can't do that. Everything that people talk about the TV programming them, and it does, they work on the subconscious, because the subconscious is something you're not super aware of, and you're not super aware of it's being programmed. And then later what happens is a lot of decisions will be taken away from the frontal lobe and will be then made by your subconscious without you knowing it. So it's pretty insidious to target that, and it's very hard to rewrite. It's hard to deprogram, it's hard to reprogram, especially when you don't know that's what's happening. That's the whole game, though, is that people that don't have, or not even people, elements that don't have your best interest in mind are hundreds of years ahead of us on this kind of stuff. The only reason we're coming around to learning some of it now is because it's breaking down. You know, the veil's breaking down. We're starting to see things. You know, 5 years ago you wouldn't have seen Michelle Obama's dick when she came out on Ellen, but now you do. Stuff like that. The old buildings in town, the public library that has statues on the roof that are several tons heavy, and they tell you it was built in 1850 when all they had were horses, wood, and fucking grit. Well, those guys just had grit. Yeah, that's some fucking serious grit. How'd they carry that fucking statue? I'm sorry, I'm swearing. You know what I mean? You start to see these things that you just didn't see before. I remember going to school, and all my school buildings, they had windows halfway underground. And I used to think, well, why would they build these windows underground? They didn't. The windows used to be street level. They were buried in the last reset. A lot of these old buildings with what would be considered to us impossible architecture now were built before the last time they shook the snow globe. The people that then came here to repopulate found all these buildings, and it was Freemasonry. And that's where you have the Freemasons, because it's free masonry, free stone, buildings they found, and they repurposed. These beautiful buildings that worked more like machines, antiquitech, as John Levy would say. Technologies that we can't understand. And then they'll tell you it's a fucking library. These magnificent buildings with this is impossible architecture and statues. Even churches. You know, you look at a church and they're designed for sound. And you think, well, why? Those giant pipe organs. I don't know, but what I think is they were used for, they were healing houses. They would play the whatever frequencies on those giant organs and to heal different parts of you, and that's why I think they were designed that way for sound. And you see buildings like that everywhere, and they give them these really inane sort of like a public library or a DMV. It's like, why would you need to have such opulence, even if you could afford or understand how to build something like that? What would be the point? You know, there is no point. And those are in cities everywhere. I mean, anywhere you go, in any American city, even out here in Hawaii, which I don't really consider America, there's places like that too. I mean, there's buildings that defy explanation. Those were things that we just didn't notice because the veil was intact. The scales were on our eyes, when the scales are coming off. Not for all of us, because not all of us are attached to the universal consciousness. Not all of us have divinity. A good way to determine who does and who doesn't is you ask someone if they can picture an apple in their mind, or if they have an inner dialogue, they can talk to themselves in their mind. You know, some people, you try to explain that to them, and they don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I have a full Roman court in my head all day going on. But if you don't, it probably means you don't have divinity. Because being able to picture the apple means you can visualize, which means then you can make constructs, which ties into what I was saying the other day about what would be considered magic, just for lack of a better term. You know, we don't have all the terminology we have to describe this stuff has been tied to fantasy, children's stories. And it's done for a reason, so that we sound like fucking idiots when you try to explain it to people. Alright, don't blame the teacher, blame the school.